All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Sacramental Charismatic podcast. We are starting season 3. I think this is episode 26, and I am joined with Wes McLachlan. Did I say that right? McLachlan.
Yeah, perfect. That was great. Yeah, perfect.
I always channel Scottish things. But Wes, you were in the Vineyard for a long time. You were on staff at our church here. You and I have been friends for 6-7 years, something like that, and it's good to have you back. I haven't recorded a podcast for like a year and a half. So
has it been that long?
It's been a lot. It's been a while. I took a little hiatus. You know,
nice.
I had to recoup a little bit. Yeah. So,
okay.
But it's good having you, Wes. I think you're going to be on a number of episodes throughout this season. The goal being to help you become the co-host, so I don't have to do it.
Sweet.
Just kidding.
Well, I'm not the co-host then. So then I'm just the host.
No, exactly. That's exactly it. It's like associate pastoring. It's the same thing. You do all the work.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what you're asking me on. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, you have a master's in theology from some school in Houston, right?
Yeah, Houston Graduate School of Theology. It was a Quaker-founded school, but
cool.
Yeah, I don't even think we learned any Quaker theology in it, ironically, but it was Quaker-founded.
Gotcha. You now live in Portland, though. You're in Oregon. Actually, you're in Vancouver.
Well, Vancouver. Yeah, Vancouver.
Sorry.
Washington, yeah.
You were in Washington State. I'm
Washington. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're starting season 3, and you and I have talked quite a bit about this idea of maybe taking a season and just talking about what it looks like to become a quote unquote sacramental charismatic, which I think we probably both have had a fair amount of people ask us over the years about how do you, for example, move from being in a church community that almost never celebrates the Eucharist, or maybe does it, maybe celebrates communion once a month or once a quarter, to having maybe a richer and thicker theology of the table. So I thought we could talk about that for a while. So awesome. Maybe you could start us off with, your journey into a sacramental charismatic tapestry, as it were. I'd be curious how you discovered those things.
Okay, sweet. So we're not talking about the Anaheim Vineyard this podcast.
So we're going to do an episode on the Anaheim. We'll get there. What do you say? The rise and fall of the Anaheim Vineyard.
Rise and fall of the Anaheim Vineyard. That would be great.
Yeah. We will do that.
Shout out to Mike Cosper. Maybe he can fund us.
Yeah. We should do an episode or 10. We'll get there. We're just gonna leave a little teaser right now. I got things to say.
I know you do.
But I haven't.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that's the one where I'm literally gonna be the host and probably just put you on the mic, and that'll be great.
I'll just read my tweets. I'll read tweets. That's all I'll do.
That'd be great.
Anyway, how'd you get there?
It started off. I think I grew up in Pentecostal and charismatic service churches. My first 7 or 8 years, literally from being born and always going to church, was in a pretty high Pentecostal setting where I mentioned the story where I would walk past the auditorium and the sanctuary, and they would be laying down towels and blankets getting ready for the service, where everyone was just going to be anointed and falling over and shaking and stuff like that, and they would be preparing for that, and that always scared me. And I was like, I don't want my parents to be falling over and shaking. That seems traumatic, and it was. So I had that, and then I was part of Alexander Fenter's church for about 5 years, from about like 8 to like 13 or so. We were part of his, and that was a really great, really good, healthy church, and that was my first experience. Even though I was really young, it was my first experience to the Vineyard, and I just remember it being a really vibrant, healthy community that was growing. I just remember it was like, if you know Alexander Fenter, he's like such a good theologian, but practical theologian too. So that was really great. And then I went.
We had Venter on an episode of the Sacramental Charismatic, and for those of you who
did,
and it was really good. So so keep going. Sorry, just wanted to let people know Venter's amazing.
To give people a background, he traveled to America with John Wimber just to find out what was happening, and then came with John Wimber and helped plant Vineyard churches in South Africa. So I was part of that, and then I was part of an AG church, and that was like when I was starting to individuate my faith, and I was like, the Vineyard didn't really have a youth group, and this AG church had a thriving youth group. All my friends were going, so I joined that one, was a leader in there. And anyways, fast forward to when I moved to Houston, and I joined the Houston Vineyard, when Michael Palandro was there leading. And then that was also the time that I started seminary. And I remember discovering the sacramental side of stuff, because a part of me was like, not disgruntled, but I never had the same charismatic experiences that everyone else had around me. Like I had some, but it always felt like, wow, why am I not getting touched the way these people are getting touched? Is there something wrong with me? And so I went through like a bit of a crisis of faith. Like, why isn't God speaking to me as clearly as all these other people, where they just get these like clear words, these clear pictures? I just never got that as much as everyone else. And there didn't seem space for that in the theology a lot of the times. And so in seminary, I really had the opportunity to dive deep into the sacramental world. And I was opened up to this whole world where the Holy Spirit was present in the sacraments, where there was space to encounter Christ every single time we come to the table. And not only that, it also played into another big part and passion of mine in spiritual formation. I just saw like the combination of like combining the individual side of spiritual formation with the communal side. And I found those two meet like really well in the Eucharist, with representing the body, and as well as like being aware of what I'm going through and all of that. So I actually remember we planted a Vineyard Church in Houston, and we, from the get-go, we knew we were going to prioritize communion every week. And we were probably, to this date, I think like the highest liturgical vineyard I've been to, where we really pushed into the liturgical acts and all of that. And in that time, we had a good Friday service. And we had what I would describe as a communal charismatic experience at the table, where every single person, and there was maybe like 50, 60 people in attendance, every single person broke down in tears after receiving communion, where there was just this weightiness in the room, where it just seemed like, I'm thinking of like Romans, where the Spirit was groaning. It was that sort of experience. And that really opened my eyes to see how the Spirit was involved in these highs that are charismatic giftings associated with like really great positive things, and this time where grief, the Spirit is really present. And that was at the table because we're remembering Jesus's death, and so there's that element to the table where we are recognizing the death of Jesus, and there's a grieving to that too. I mean, that's associated with Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so we're immersed into that story, and as we became immersed into that story, I felt these communal charismatic giftings happening at the same time. So it was a combination of experience and this richness of theology that I encountered that really propelled me into this sacramental world. And then coming to the Red Bluff Vineyard, and I mean, that was the biggest reason why I came there, was because I wanted to come be with someone who took it as seriously as I did, as well as had a vision for that, and you did. And so that was also like, I think in the Houston context, we had a more of like, it was maybe a little bit too lopsided. And in our expression in the Red Bluff Vineyard, I think we did a really good job of combining like this to what's the word to put it? Like we did it every week, but we communicated it in a way that was accessible to everyone, where it didn't feel like this was an insiders club, where actually the table was welcome for everyone, no matter where you're coming from or background. And that I learned a lot through that. So that's been my journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that's maybe, for this season, I'm just kind of thinking out loud right here about some of the topics we should definitely cover. Obviously, one would be like, how do you transition a church to become more centered on the table? I think that's one, because there's some really good ways to do that, and then there's some really bad ways to do that will actually undermine the goal of trying to build a richer, thicker Eucharistic theology. But also, the open table too. It's interesting because we, the Roman Catholic tradition takes the Eucharist very seriously. Yet we reach completely different way of approaching the open table, right? Because the Roman Catholic tradition says we hold a sacramental theology only Roman Catholics can receive, whereas you and I would say we hold a sacramental theology. We should have the table open for everybody to experience grace. So that's obviously another topic. But with the Sacramental Charismatic thing, like, would you agree that the table is kind of like the gateway drug, or the
it really is? Oh my gosh, it is. Yeah,
because it leads to a whole richness of, litanies. The inclusion of litanies would be one thing. I think we Vineyard folk and charismatics in general haven't really worked out our theology of baptism very well. We either just inherit Baptistic theology, or or we just don't even worry about it. But there's also more. I think the whole like worldview, because I think what probably has helped us navigate toward a more sacramental charismatic approach would be our theology of healing prayer and our theology of worship in our tradition in the Vineyard, right? Because we see our music as being a sacramental space. It is a space where we experience God's presence. It has meaning and richness. It's a physical thing that has spiritual dimension to it. And then prayer, obviously healing prayer, same thing. So what else would you say? Like when I think of Hans Boersma's thinking about the tapestry language, the heavenly participation, and I think of sacramental tapestry. What are other things you would throw into the idea of being a sacramental charismatic?
I think combining, I think what you just said of like, it gives, I really like it because it gives us the flexibility and the richness to combine, like what you were saying, like we could have ministry time around the table, and we could invite people to the table, and then from there have a rich ministry time where we're inviting the Spirit to come and heal people, and it's not two competing things, but they're actually extremely complementary. And so I think the way I see, like, if I look at a more of a broader thing, and I think that's all we're talking about today, is like we're giving like the landscape, and then we're going to, each episode we can go into different sections, but generally it's like from the Vineyard and like inheriting more of a charismatic theology growing up, I want to recognize the goodness in that. Like I want to recognize that the Pentecostal charismatic movements were started for a reason, because they were not introducing, but maybe re-recognizing a part of our theology and way of doing church that maybe that had been forgotten or lost for a period of time. And just as much in the same token, I want to take that, and from where we're coming from, we've also got this rich tapestry of this practice of centering communion that's deeply embedded with the Holy Spirit. So it's like this both and that's a classic Vineyard thing, right? Both and, like we're taking this and we're taking this. John Wimber eat the meat, spit out the bones. Like all of that fits within a Vineyard charismatic framework,
That's good. Yeah. And
So,
I mean,
yeah.
just thinking about First Corinthians, like chapter 11, Eucharist, chapter 12, spiritual gifts, chapter 13, spiritual gifts grounded in love, chapter 14,
Yeah.
more spiritual gift. It's like Paul flows right from the Eucharistic theology that he's teaching in chapter 11 right into that too. That's good.
Really good.
I do think
I'm glad we brought the Bible into this.
Do you? Are you glad about that?
I joked with my friend the other day, who's like a biblical, he's a biblical theologian, and so I joke, I was like, dude, it's way easier just like being a theologian, because I can just pick what verses I want, and then and his hair, he was like, sorry, carry on.
He was physically sick by your
Yeah.
When you're thinking about what you just said, though, I think that's really really helpful, because it does seem like I'm watching. I guess the reason why we started talking about maybe doing this season is because I'm seeing a lot of pastors who are I think being influenced by the sacramental traditions and are like, there's something about, because like I grew up very similar to you, like the Eucharist was, it's like I knew it was a thing we did, but I didn't understand any of the meaning behind it. It wasn't regularly celebrated, but and so there's something really beautiful about connecting with 2,000 years of church history and practices that are rooted in Scripture that Christians have seen as valuable for a long time. But what I've noticed is it seems like it's clunky and almost sometimes unhelpful the way that pastors are transitioning their, historically charismatic church, like historically charismatic evangelicalish church, to become, more, we would say, balanced in keeping these tensions, but they're maybe doing it in a way that's not very helpful. And I think the two extremes, I guess, I see within our stream is that there's either churches that are super Pentecostally charismatic-y, really influenced by Bethel and those traditions,
and the dwelling place. So.
Yes. You just keep doing that, and then, but then on the other hand, it's like you go to a Vineyard Church that maybe is so quote unquote liturgical and sacramental. There's almost no room for charismatic practices, and I think both of those are fundamentally missing out on some pretty important things. Like I guess the point is that we should be able to embrace both the prepared prayers, for example, the litanies and prayers and pre-written things that the Holy Spirit has led people to put together for the course of 2,000 years, alongside spontaneous prophetic outpourings, stirrings, empowerment. So it seems like that's definitely an issue. What would you add to that? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when we did that, when we planted the church in Houston, we definitely went a little bit too far into the sacramental stream. And we probably overemphasized that and maybe lost a bit of the vision of creating spaces for charismatic experiences that, were rooted in both. And so I think you're 100% right. It's really tough to balance that, especially when you're just being introduced to it, or when you're just getting started in it and you've got no blueprint. There's not a lot of blueprint for this, right? I mean, I remember going at one stage, I was like, I don't know, is there space for this in the Vineyard? Is there either, do I just need to become Anglican, or do I just need to forget about the sacramental side? That's what I felt like. That was the tension that I was feeling. And thank God that we've gone through what we've gone through, because for me, it's so clear that there is space. And so I think what you're getting to is so true. It's a risky for a pastor to embark on this journey, because there's a lot of tensions. It's clunky, but I think there's more spaces opening up for it not to be bad. I think there's ways to do it that you can make it really, really good and really, really helpful and really pivotal to the church's, health.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of a couple, like, say a pastor, and maybe this will be the next episode. We'll make the next episode be how not to be a sacramental charismatic.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be good.
But I mean, the one where it's like, hey, I really want to have a richer theology of the Eucharist. And so we're going to start celebrating the Eucharist every week starting tomorrow with zero thought into it, or zero preparation, or like even laying the biblical theological groundwork as to why that would be important. Would be what would you add?
What would it's in terms of like the next steps to take?
What would you add? Do you think? What's another mistake that you would add to, or maybe connect it to that?
Not connecting it to the practical elements of your service. Like, how is this practically going to fit with a Sunday morning service? It's a practical thing that's being done, as well as like a mysterious thing, but there's also a practical side. So how are you creating transitions around the Eucharist? How is it integrating with the rest of the worship set? Like how I'm going to just list up, but like the language, I think one of the best things we did at the Red Bluff Vineyard starting out was that we created very clear language about it, and we led it in a way that was not like, it didn't eliminate the mystery, but it also didn't make it like unapproachable, if that makes sense. So I think those are some things to consider. Yeah.
Like, I mean, don't use the word sacrament very often unless you explain it.
Yeah.
It seems like, it seems like sometimes, so you and I both really have a value for the Anglican tradition, obviously, but, it's interesting how sometimes I wonder if some of the sacramental charismatic folks are trying to impress their Anglican friends more than trying to serve their congregations.
Congregation,
It's like I love sacramental theology. I've done a significant amount of theological work on that, but it's like when we would use language in our church, we always would communion. Pretty much everybody, for the most part, it's in the church understands. Lord's table, pretty much. But even then, we've always had non-churched or new church people too. So we would even explain those things. But like if we use the word Eucharist, hey, that comes from a Greek word that means thanksgiving, and this is a meal where we can express gratitude, right? Or sacrament is a way to experience God's grace. It's a physical thing that we do with spiritual reality. Felt like but my number one, I found this document that I had made, like, I don't know, it's probably 12 years ago now, or 10 years ago, for our previous church on how to lead communion, because we always had different people doing it. And I remember the one thing was, don't ever say we're taking communion. That's like the number one. We are receiving communion. We are receiving grace. Yeah. So that was helpful, I think, for our church communities, because there's common language around the Eucharist. So we're not we're trying to build into our community and awareness of that. So that's good. So
that's those are really good points. And I think also, like what you said, touched on, like, always assume there's someone new that's going to be at your church on Sunday that either has a complicated history with communion or has no idea what communion is.
Yeah.
I think having those in the back of your mind when you're leading communion is really important, because you could, like, if someone doesn't know what it is, it's going to come across as like, what do I do? So
hey, can we do a little side? Okay. So as you know, the Red Bluff Vineyard we just always have had new to church people coming in. It's just every Sunday, it's just a given that there's going to be somebody in the room that has never been here before. So what about churches out there that maybe don't have new people in their churches? What can they do to get more new people in their church? Hey, this is bonus material. This is bonus material for anybody listening. Wes is going to give you he's going to give you the 5-step. He's going to give you the 5-step.
No, I've got a one-step solution. I've got a one-step solution, and it's actually really easy. Contact Steve Nicholson. He's retired, and invite him to your church he will give you a 10-step plan, literally follow those steps to the point, and people will come to your church. So that's there we go.
Wow. That's great. Steve now hates
really
you.
Insightful.
Yeah. Do you have anything else?
Pay him.
Do you have any other?
Yeah.
Do you have any pastoral words of wisdom for anybody that
wasn't good enough?
Anything that comes from you in your experience?
That's hilarious. Well, I mean, it's got to be embedded in your vision. I mean, if it's not embedded in your vision to like reach new people, then that's the starting place, isn't it? I mean, if you're just going to be like, oh, I want new people to come, and then that's it. I mean, and then it's just like throwing stuff at a wall and hoping it sticks without like a common vision for it. So I think that's really important. So I think just making sure your vision has space for like reaching the unreached. Like, is that part of the vision and mission of the church?
Yeah,
that would be my starting step. Yeah.
Yeah, because what if a new person comes and your whole entire church vision and church way of doing church is just not helpful
to include them? Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point.
Like,
yeah. I mean, I feel like kind of in some ways we've been blessed in this way. You know, we've always had kind of an invitational culture, which is partly, but we've never had the luxury of being able to assume everybody in the room knows all the secret handshakes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like when we with our preaching, it makes it really challenging because like we have to, if we're going to tell an Old Testament story, we gotta really give some context to it. So yeah, actually I was talking to this guy. I was talking to this guy the other day, and he was saying how he was trying to talk to somebody who like knows all these random Bible verses because they study the Bible, but they didn't grow up in the church. So like he said something one time, he's like, "Oh man, that's older than Methuselah," and like the lady had no idea. She was like, "Who's Methuselah?" He's like, "You know all these other random things in the Bible," but she just hadn't grown up in Sunday school, so she didn't have that awareness.
Yeah,
that's good.
No, that makes sense. I mean, and I think I also saw that stat where, I mean, if you're wanting to reach the like Gen Z now, I mean, I think was it Barna or something? I can't remember. It said like less than 10% of Gen Z knows any Bible story. So, I mean, the assumption that when you just throw like when you throw Bible examples, story examples, and assume that everyone knows what you're talking about, you can't do that anymore, because there's a good chance that a lot of people are like, "What do you mean, Jonah? What whale?"
Yeah,
anyways,
that's good.
That's for another thing, though.
Yeah, this is all really, really good content for us to flesh out maybe in more depth in future episodes. Well, I guess, with the Sacramental Charismatic tapestry, what would you say is the most surprising aspect of leaning into that world?
That's a good question. What would you say? Let me turn this back onto you and ask you a question. What would you say to that?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. I was hoping you'd give me. Don't you remember how this is pretty much how I've done everything?
I thought I was supposed to eventually take over, so this is me taking over and asking you.
Got you.
Yeah.
The most surprising thing. Okay, I'll tell you. The most surprising thing is that I think that being a sacramental charismatic is the most effective missional ecclesiology to have. I'm surprised because if you do it well and you take the time to explain everything, the richness has a way of being attractive as well as formative as well as effective with everybody. So like in our church community, what I've noticed is, so obviously the hyper Pentecostal, hyper Baptistic fundamentalist, they're not going to like the Vineyard anyway. So like, why try to win those folks? Like, we're not going to, we let women be pastors. And by let women be pastors, slap me in the face because we don't let them. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
We acknowledge that women can be gifted and are gifted. Yeah. So
every leadership.
Go to your other church that doesn't believe that.
Yeah. Great.
So that crowd, we're not going to ever appeal to very much. But what we do, I think, is we provide a sense of purpose. In the sacramental tapestry, we also provide an epistemology and a way of interpreting the world that we live in. And then also, it really does connect with like people who grew up in Catholic, Lutheran, Methodist, a lot of traditions, as a kid. Like there's some sense of like commonality. Like I've been shocked. So our church history, which you've kind of touched on a little bit, right? So we get here. My wife and I started co-pastoring, and I think communion was like celebrated once, maybe twice a year, is what I've kind of gathered. And it wasn't very regular. And so what happens is we went to doing it monthly for about 6 months to a year. No, about 6 months. And then I think by the time you had come, we had moved to weekly, correct?
No, I was on the tail end of the monthly, and I think like
when
4 months after I arrived, we started doing. But we were like really in the end game of like.
We might have even been doing it every other week. Yeah, it was
something like that.
Yeah. So we were in this, and we had this plan, or I had kind of sketched out this plan. So we went, about 8 months, 9 months, I guess, of once a month. And then we started doing it pretty often. And then we went to a weekly celebration, just kind of pastoring the congregation through that. And so we've been doing that for at least 4.5 years now, I would say, weekly.
Yeah.
We started doing Ash Wednesday services right away, which interestingly enough, you led almost every one of them because I was almost always out of town.
You were, yeah.
Yeah, it was like crazy, So we've done Ash Wednesday services though, and those have been really, really rich. But we started, I wanted to start including more litany prayers, more prayers to help guide our prayer session, which we place that inside of our music time. So our typical order of service is like welcome everybody, sing 2 or 3 songs, pray a litany, sing another song, receive communion. That's pretty much our standard. But so the litany thing though, what we did, and I thought we'd get a lot of pushback. I actually thought we'd have more people complain and be like, I don't like that pre-written stuff. I have not heard a single complaint. I have heard literally dozens and dozens and dozens of people who are like, oh man, I love that. And so, but what we did to do that, this would be another whole episode which could flesh out. But I mean, I did not lead a single litany for 3 months. I had all different influential people in our church do it. And we just kind of spread that out over the course of 3 months. So every Sunday we had a different prayer focus, we don't do really long ones. I mean, it probably takes a total of 4 minutes, 5 minutes at the most, probably 3 to 4. Always praying the Lord's Prayer though at the end of that. And so what's been surprising to me is how many people have been like, when I first got invited to the Vineyard, I grew up Catholic and I was expecting it to be like kind of like this, I don't know. Like it's almost like they have this category for like boring Protestant Baptist evangelical.
Yeah.
It's like they just have this assumption. And then they're like, I've had multiple people tell me, and you guys tricked me. You guys did the Eucharist and like everything. It had a lot of the same elements that I grew up with, but it was like done in a way that you guys really believe what you're saying. Which was a really great compliment because it was like, we do believe what we're saying. So that's been surprising to me. It's like the totally non-churched person has no idea that they shouldn't like litanies, right? They don't have this Protestant background of like, we're not Catholic. We should not like liturgy. So they're like, oh, this is what we do. This is part of our service. We pray together every Sunday. And then the people who have a little bit of church background are like, if they have a sacramental liturgical background, they're like, oh man, this is super, super rich. And it connects me to my childhood and it connects us to the larger church. And then the people also who haven't ever done that, they grew up more evangelical or more charismatic. I think a lot of those folks like it too, because they can sense and they can experience how it is. The Spirit is at work through it, so that's been pretty surprising to me. Like I was kind of shocked that we didn't get like letters of hate mail from people leaving the church because we write our prayers. So
because we say just one planned prayer, just one. Oh gosh,
which is,
Yeah,
I'm probably a bad pastor right there. Maybe I should have more faith in our congregation. So,
well, I think there's also like just recognizing like the small amounts of trauma pastors carry.
yeah,
This
exactly.
anticipation of like just
Waiting for the shoe to drop.
Waiting for
the shoe to drop. Hey, actually,
no, that's good.
Let me ask you a question. Because we didn't really talk about. So you're no longer in Red Bluff. You left us at the end of 2019, right before the wonderful global pandemic
COVID.
that happened. COVID
Great
happened.
timing.
You moved to Portland. Great place to be.
Yeah.
In the
great
pandemic.
Place to be during that time. Yeah.
Yep. Super. Not at all political.
No.
But you you're working as a chaplain. You've done a bunch of chaplain training. So I was, I know you just did an overnighter. So you regularly are sitting with people in the midst of loss and grief and pain and suffering and cancer and death. How has like the Sacramental Charismatic worldview made an impact on your current vocation and ministry?
I don't think I would be able to have handled my job without it. And I don't say that lightly. Like, if I didn't already have some type of theology, if I didn't really have that, I would really struggle with like what I encounter in the hospital and how that weighs up against the theology I have. For me, the sacramental theology actually gives me grounding for what I encounter in the hospital, and it gives space. And I'll go back to like the Spirit being present in grief. It's given space for that. And just like the idea, like I have never clung to the scripture verses of Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because I have patients that say the exact same thing when they've just had a terrible diagnosis, been in a motor car accident, lost their limbs as a result. They were, in their eyes, amazing. Like they weren't in sin. And I'm talking about Christian patients now, but just goes to the same for non-Christian patients or interfaith patients. But especially for like Christian patients, and they're going, I was part of a church community. I was tied. I was doing all the things a Christian should be doing, and yet this has happened to me. How does this make sense? And the idea of being forsaken for God is very real for people in a hospital. And so for me, I see there's that story located in communion, and the story of Jesus's death is a story of grief, and it's a story of Jesus not abandoning his humanity, but for me, it's almost the height of Jesus's humanity in his vulnerableness. And if Jesus is able to say, God, why have you forsaken me? So can we. Like, that allows us that space to engage in that side of relationship with God. And the Spirit, for me, is present in that. And so I think it's really been able to have that holding space for me. So that's how I encountered in the hospital. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's really good. So, I mean, it's in many ways, it's kind of been a framework that's allowed you just to be able to not completely lose it in the midst of some of that really challenging stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's also the communion has also reframed my idea of what the Holy Spirit is doing in us. And I used to really cling to the phrase. I think it was one of the church fathers, and I can't remember, who said, "God became human so that we might become more like God." Do you remember who said that?
We might.
Anyways,
you're talking about
Athanasius. Was it Athanasius?
Pentecost? Yeah, but the latest book that we both it's that evangelical Pentecostal sacramental book. Because he talks about that. Yeah, what is it? Man, we need to evangelical. I think I have it in my Kindle.
It's Evangelical Pentecostal Sacramental. That's the title of the book.
Yes. And he talks about, who's the author of that? It's Gordon T. Smith.
Gordon T. Smith. That's right.
Yeah. But Gordon talks about how the goal of spiritual formation, the goal of discipleship is to become more, to be connected to and more like Jesus, essentially.
Yeah.
He's like John 14, 15, and 16 and 17, I think.
Yeah.
That's,
and I think good. I think what I have found is like, actually, what if the Spirit, and when we think of Jesus, I think we automatically think of like, oh, Jesus is God, but Jesus was human. And I think like Paul talks about Adam pointing to Jesus, like we were not designed around Adam, we were designed around Jesus. And so actually what it means to be human means to be like Jesus. And so the Spirit is actually trying to make us more human, like into the humanity that Jesus is, like as he brings us into Jesus's story and points us to Jesus, we're actually becoming more human. And what does it look like to be human? Well, look at Jesus. And Jesus was this person who was vulnerable, admitted when he was struggling, admitted when he needed help, all of that sort of stuff. So I think that's how I've been reshaped by communion, and it wouldn't have been for communion if it was not for communion. Yeah.
I think, what you're talking about too also brings up this idea of liminality or liminal spaces, right? I think in our now and not yet, we have a lot of emphasis on now in certain churches.
Yeah.
And then we have a lot, but in fairness to those churches, there's a lot of emphasis on not yet. In churches too, right? And it's like we haven't done maybe a lot of theology on that word and in between now and not yet.
Yeah.
Right?
And not yet.
So this
That's
liminal
good.
space of, how is God present in the midst of suffering? So it's like not yet the fullness of the kingdom, not yet the consummation of the age, but now there is in a real presence, as it were. Like in the Eucharist, it's easy to lean into that presence discussion, but with grief and suffering and loss, God is still near to us. But what does that look like? I mean, if your theology is only, if your theology is only victorious now, we're taking the mountain for the Lord, or one of the 7 mountains for the Lord, then you miss out on some pretty rich and important pastoral theology, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well,
and I just to add one more thing, I'm also thinking of like just how important this is. It really, when you dive in, it really starts to reshape, like you said, the surprising thing you said, it really starts to influence everything else you do, right? It really makes you think about discipleship, mission, all of this stuff. It really, so I would say that as a warning sign, if pastors are wanting to dive into this, be prepared to change as a result. Because it's that powerful.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why we need to. We're going to spend some time in this season how to be, because I do think. It's like I had a friend of mine who just became the senior pastor of a church. I think he's been like an associate pastor for a while, and he transitioned in, and he, so he's took over. I think your classic evangelical charismatic church. They love Jesus. They're all about creating space for the Spirit. They like singing worship songs, and they teach the Bible. And he's had this appreciation for the sacramental stuff, and he's just kind of like, oh man, now that I'm like the guy, we're starting. And he had this like huge list of things that he's going to start doing like within the first month. And I was just like, no, don't do it. You have like 200 people. Plan. Yeah, exactly. It's like you have 200-ish people in your community who have been, well, here's the thing. They have been shaped and formed already, and they have a worldview, and they have ecclesiological expectations and assumptions, and it takes time to walk people through that, And what's cool, I think, if you do it the right way, you can have minimal collateral damage. I guess that's and that's very pastoral.
And that's sort of why we're doing this podcast too, right? Yeah. It's just to say, hey, you can do this without it being a calamity. And actually being good. Yeah.
It doesn't help us for your Sacramental Charismatic Church
Yes.
to implode.
Yeah, that's not helping our cause. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not helping the kingdom and you're not helping the Sacramental Charismatic cause. That's good. Yeah. Well, okay. So future episodes, we're going to tease out a lot more of these topics in depth. Wes and I are going to prepare a little bit more, and we'll have some helpful steps I think we can walk through. But I do think, Wes, we should have a conversation about Anaheim. I've had 9 gazillion people ask me about my thoughts, and as you know, I have many about that topic.
Yeah. I have a few too, but
I'd like to hear yours.
I think that would be good. Yeah.
I think you and I can have like a therapy session, having a conversation about it.
I think that sounds good. It's going to save us a lot of money, so that sounds good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, hey, before we wrap up, let's talk about some resources. So, if somebody wants to get into this world, what would be some good stuff for them to read?
I think, like, theologically, I think of what's his name? The Spiritual Theology book.
Simon Chan?
Simon Chan, for like a good grounding that combines, he recognizes the Pentecostal, Charismatic, and Sacramental. And then that book we spoke about, the Gordon T. Smith's book, is also really good. And then I think, what's his name? The guy in the UK, Andrew.
Crowded House guy.
His last name.
Yeah, doesn't he? Isn't it like doesn't he have a book, Charismatic Sacramental, or?
Yeah, dang it.
He wrote the book I was going to write. I was like, yeah.
Except I think he practices closed tables, so there might be an opportunity.
Yeah, to show why he's wrong.
Yeah,
he's one of the Crowded House Network guys. Wow, he wrote. Actually, no, isn't it Tim Chester?
No.
Oh, okay. We're talking about a different guy then. So, because Tim Chester has written, Tim Chester has written some books. Hey, Gary Tyra wrote Getting Real. Yeah, Gary's work is
really good book.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I would there'll be links for all these inside of the description here. But hey, I just got a book. I think I actually had it a long time ago, but I get a gazillion books and I never looked at it. But this is a book right here called it's called The Hunger Inside: How the Meal Jesus Gave Transforms Lives, by Brad Roth, I believe. And here's an interesting thing. So I just saw this today. This is terrible. It's literally been sitting on a coffee. I thought somebody's bought it for me, but it says, "Dear Pastor Luke, I appreciate how you're weaving the sacramental and charismatic streams together and wanted to share my new book with you. Grace and peace." So I feel like we should have this guy on an episode.
I think we should. I think that sounds good. And also, since Beth Moore is following you on Twitter, we should try to get her too.
Hey. Listen, she doesn't follow everybody. She doesn't follow everybody.
And we should have a discussion on Open Table and invite Mike Bird. That would be good to try to get him on.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because Michael Bird recently wimped out on taking a hard stand on whether or not he's on the table. So
maybe we could try to convince him.
Yeah.
I could. By the way, that author I'm thinking of is Andrew Wilson.
Oh, Andrew Wilson. That's right. He is the author. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Great book. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, those are some good things. We're going to talk more about these topics. If you're a listener, please like, subscribe, share. That would really help us out. But we would love to have you let us know if you have questions or thoughts. You can leave those comments, or you can send us emails, or you can at Wes on his Instagram. Hey, Wes, you have you're like a photographer now too. So which Instagram do you want people to follow you on?
Both. How about that?
You want them to, you just want as many follows as you can get.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
No, I think my Instagram's Wes Mac5, and then photography is Wesley David Photography. But Wes Mac5 is where I post more like any theology stuff if I do.
Yeah. Once a month you post something. on there about
if
theology.
that right now. Oh my gosh, probably once every 2 months.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I just took this massive, like, no joke, year and a half off of all extra churchy things.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. And I noticed that why do we do that? What's your excuse? Why
What do you
I had a
mean?
blog? Like, I don't know. We don't do anything anymore.
I don't know either. Now maybe we can. We'll start that now. Yeah. I'll post more now.
Yeah, no, oh, yeah.
Yeah, no.
You felt
I want to
convicted.
felt convicted. Yeah.
Bro, you're not building your brand, bro.
Oh, gosh, I know it.
Yeah, exactly. That's partly why I just quit. It's like I can't deal with it. All right, man. Well, hey, thank you to everybody listening. We will have another episode in the next week, and we will go from there. Thank you so much. Wes, Thanks for joining me.
Sweet. Thanks.